And here we are with James Introcaso for our main topic on draw steal and the general subject of introducing new RPGs. If you've been listening to our first segment, you caught that we touched already on a number of these concepts, but let me back up and say, James, welcome. You are the lead game designer for MCDM, designing the new Draw Steal RPG, which is coming out soonish. When is that?
Yeah, so it should be coming out this summer. We're targeting probably like a July-ish release date. So we should have an update for backers and everything coming at the end of May, which we are basically in the back half of May. So it should be coming soon, where we'll give an exact date. I've been in a lot of meetings where we're figuring that out, but we're editing the book and we're getting ready to lay out the book now too. So we're there. We're there at the end of the road. We just need to make it. As you know, being at the end of the road of the project also means like, oh, we still have like 40% of the work to do for some reason.
Yes. Somehow it's endless. It's endless. Well, congratulations. Yeah. I love your work. I've loved watching what MCDM is doing and what you are doing at MCDM specifically. I've loved your work. Whether it's Ghosts of Saltmarsh and it's Descent into or Dragon Heist, all of your work across the D&D spectrum, DM's Guild stuff, Guild Adept, and then getting into the MCDM area. I held up all these books before on our news segment, but I mean, just love what you've been doing, and you're just one of the greatest people. Not to even mention how much fun your podcast was when you had the time to do it. So thanks for being on the show and talking about this issue, which is a really a key thing that every game has to deal with, every RPG publisher, because as you said, like it's one thing to make the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this giant challenge of, okay, I've made a game. Now I need to see whether people play it. And, the very first RPG of D&D had to deal with this of, okay, we've made this little box. Will anyone buy it? And oh my goodness, people are buying it. Well, now what do we do? And how do we answer to that audience and retain it? And so we're going to talk about this topic of introducing new RPGs and why it's so important to everybody. And James, let's maybe talk first about some of the challenges. I'm sure you have thought about this at MCDM. What are some of the challenges about trying to introduce a new RPG to people out there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. One of the biggest hurdles of RPGs, right, is that there are many that you can play solo. Sure, there's a lot of great journaling RPGs, and I recommend people definitely go check those out. But when we're talking about games like D&D, right, and where a lot of the fun comes from the fact that we're all going to sit down at a table together and surprise each other, right, and play characters and team up and do cool moves and impress our friends, and also they'll impress us, right? Like we need people at the table, right? And so there is a big challenge in that it's a group activity, and there are different hurdles, and like what might be a small hurdle for somebody could be a big hurdle for somebody else, right? Yeah. So like I play a lot of role-playing games and I read a lot of role-playing games, but it's also what I do for work. So like in a sense, right, it's easy for me to pick up the rules to a role-playing game because I'm writing them all day, I'm thinking about them all day, whereas somebody else might say, it's going to take me a long time to learn XYZ RPG. And I do think part of that is the fact that like D&D has a big part of the market share, which means that they have a big part of the player base, right? And D&D, when you look at it at its core, right, is 3 thick core rule books, right? And even just the player's handbook, right? Like if you hand somebody the player's handbook and just say, this is all you need to know, they're like, it's over 200 pages of stuff. What do you mean this? Like if I play Monopoly, I get this thin little book that comes with Monopoly, right? Any other game, even something complicated like Gloomhaven, doesn't have a giant book like this that comes with it.
Yeah, good point.
And so I think what happens is that sets the expectation in many players' minds that, hey, the next role-playing game I learn, it's going to take me as long, right? And that's not true, but you don't know that that's not true because like one, it could be a shorter, you could play Honey Heist and have a 1 page of rules and be ready to go. But the other thing is one thing that I think is becoming less and less true thanks to actual plays. And like, you can go on YouTube and watch. I remember before the advent of that, right? Trying to explain what a role-playing game was to someone, right?
Yeah.
And so just having that, just understanding that concept now makes playing your second role-playing game easier, I feel like, because you're like, well, wait, I get now what my role is, what the role of the person running the game is, and that kind of thing, and I can pick it up, right? And like, if you go to play Pathfinder, right, it's a lot like D&D. A lot of the core rules are the same. If you go to play Esper Genesis, it's a lot like D&D, right? It's sci-fi and it's different, but it's got the same core rule of roll a d20, higher is better, add a thing, and overcome a target number, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think that the perceived learning curve, and then also is hard because odds are in a group of, let's say, 6 people, there's going to be somebody who's like, well, can't we just play this game that I know because I'm busy and I have all these other, and I really just want to sit here and eat pizza and make Monty Python jokes with you all, right? That's the point of this for me. Why do I have to learn new math? And fair enough, right? Like, I don't think that that's a bad reason. But yeah, I think that's, for us, one of the biggest hurdles, right, is like, it's the Boss Baby meme of the guy who's seen the Boss Baby and that's the only movie he's seen. And then the second movie he sees, he's like, this is just like Boss Baby. It's like, well, no, this is Alien Covenant and it's nothing like Boss Baby, but because you've only ever seen 2 movies, right? And that's, people get this impression from D&D that everything else will be just as hard to learn, right?
Yeah. And even D&D doesn't have to be that hard if you break it down. Like, that's one of the things that always amazes me about RPGs is that if you really think about what the key rules are that you need to know, it's usually not that much. And actually, D&D is one of the more complicated ones. But your discussion of different groups and that the idea that, it's not just you may like this book, but you've got to work with your group, reminds me of sort of the opposite ends of a spectrum, maybe, where Enrique Bertrand, right, new BDM, who's a friend of ours, he has talked about how he will say like, oh, I just got, this great game. And his group's like, nah, man, we just want to play D&D. Don't even want to try it, right? Just off the table, not even consider it. Whereas my group, I'm very fortunate to have, we come up with dozens of RPGs. And it's the hard part is picking what we want to play next and not getting too engrossed in a campaign because we actually want to end so we can play other things, right? And there's no shortage of the types of games we want to play, and the fact that they can be very different and weird is a feature, not a problem for us. But we are not the typical. I don't know what the typical is, but let's say those are 2 far ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah, I think it's true, and I think, right, I don't know about you, but I played a lot of D&D as a kid with the idea every time we sit down, like, we're going to play to the end, whatever that was for that edition of D&D. And often you didn't, right? And so it felt like why would we move on to another game? We hadn't yet mastered D&D.
More levels, more stuff.
Yeah, like, I want to see what a 9th level spell looks like, right? I've been playing D&D for years. I haven't seen that, right? With that sort of feeling. Now, it's years later, have seen 9th level spells, right?
It's like 8th level. Turns out, you get an extra die on it or something. And you argue a little bit more.
Exactly. Or you have to read a giant chunk of text and you're like, I just cast Fireball at 9th level. That's it. I don't need to. It's too hard. And so I do think that one of the big things, though, that is true is that, like, I have often found that for many groups, and again, it varies, right? There's people like Enrique's group who are just like, no way. We're just not doing it. But there will be people who are willing if you're willing to do the work, right? Yeah. And so a lot of that work comes in from you being the one to run the game, but also like showing up with pre-gens and an adventure. And that's where I think like starter sets for things are really key. And you see a lot of games do this. Hey, go for free, right? Here's a URL, or in the back of the book, right? It's got the starting adventure and there are pre-gens and, and I have found that people are willing to say like, okay, you know what? Hey, Shawn can't make it tonight, but 4 of us are here. I really have wanted to run Daggerheart for a long time. Let's sit down and try it, right? And then what happens is Shawn gets FOMO and it's like, hey, I wanted to be a frog person in Daggerheart because I heard it was really fun from James and Teos. And it's like, well, you should have been at the podcast recording. I don't know what to tell you, right? And
this is like many layered your example here. I appreciate this. This is great.
Yeah, exactly. Shawn's going to talk about this in therapy next week, I think.
Shouldn't have gone off to the Lorecast to make fun of ready actions and what Teos thinks about them. So, you know.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and I want to go back a step to think about just even how you get the game to be noticed. Because when I was growing up as a kid, we would go to a hobby shop, which had model trains and, you know, models you glue together and things like that. And then it would have an RPG section. And as you were going to look at what your next D&D purchase might be, you would see Shadowrun or Rifts or, you know, all these other games, and something would call to you and you'd sit there going, this Shadowrun thing, this cover of this book is amazing, right? There's this hacker and there's this, you know, like shaman type dude, but he's got a gun, and there's this looks amazing, like corporations, and then you would buy it and say, fellas, we got to play this, you know? And that kind of thing happened a lot to bring games to the table. But that's not how we buy things now. Yeah. And what do you think, like, what are, like, you know, maybe you've talked about this at MCDM, like, how do you approach even getting to the audience? And is like every gamer target? Are all non-gamers a target? How do you even think of what an audience is and how to reach them?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? And MCDM was created almost by accident, right? In the sense that, and I wasn't at the company at the time, but I've heard it, and I also was at a convention when the first Kickstarter for Strongholds and Followers launched, right? And what happened was Matt Colville had a YouTube channel for years, right? And amassed an audience that way, and then said, oh, you know what would be great? I think I would like to make this book of these rules that I've talked about to my audience, and I could get my friends who I work with at a video game studio right now involved in helping me get the book out. We could all share in the profits, and, you know, like, maybe that means that some of us would have like a nice little bonus that we could use to buy a house, you know, put a down payment on a house or whatever, right? And it did so much better than he anticipated that it was like, oh, now to fulfill this, me and those friends actually need to go quit our jobs and start a company,
and make a
right?
Company. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, right. And that was by accident. I mean, he built up an audience on purpose, right? Yeah. And then from there said, like, oh, I want to make this thing, and this audience could help fund it. And if they don't want it, then I won't make it, right? Like, so using crowdfunding as a model to see, do you want this or do you not, right, is great. But so that was his way of doing that. And what happens, there's sort of this kind of like momentum thing that can happen when you launch a project, which is, I didn't know who Matt Colville was, right? But I was at a convention and you sat down. It was you who told me about it first, right? You sat down and you were like, hey, this YouTuber has this thing and it is going bananas right now on Kickstarter. And so we're all get out our phones and we're looking at it, right? And then, like, it means that a person who knew of Matt Colville but hadn't really watched his videos, was suddenly is like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of people here now. There's a lot of rewards. Looks pretty good, right? Like, I'll join in, and I'll at least get the PDF, right? See what it's like.
Yeah, I backed it too.
And yeah, exactly. You know, and like in Mike Shea, I think, is a good example of this too, right? Like, builds an audience through a blog, right? Slyflourish.com, right? And then from there is like, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to take these tips that I've been writing about, and I'm going to put them together in a book, and I'm going to take this advice and put it together, right? And then it, you know, and so a lot of it comes from right now. I feel like if you look around, many of the most successful things are people who have some audience, right? Brandon Sanderson, and then they create something. But it's hard because what are you going to do? Tell people like, well, just go build an audience and then make an RPG. Like, why?
Yeah.
No, that doesn't make sense. And we also want to bring people to Draw Steel, right, who aren't part of that audience. But for the game to have life beyond its initial release, right, we've got to bring in more people than what is just there, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think Shadow Dark has actually done a great job of this, right? Shadow Dark, very successful campaign, right, for their launch, and now has an even more successful one that is letting more people access the core rules and that sort of thing. And so I think letting people know and giving people the tools who want to play the game to play it is really important, right? So you have this audience who wants to play, and you have to give them those tools we were talking about. Things like quick starts, things like character sheets, pregens, a starter adventure, right? Giving them those things then helps me bring it to the table and say, Teos, you don't know about Shadow Dark, but you're about to learn. Right. And you're like, ooh, okay, excellent. Right. Like James is excited about this. Let's see. And now the next Shadow Dark Kickstarter comes and you're like, I'm going to buy it too.
Right. And now when it comes to like that moment of where you say, hey, my friend, or even if you're the creator and you're saying, hey, potential person, here's why you should listen to us. How do you communicate what the game is? And I'm thinking of, like it's an elevator pitch or it's a concept. It's something that is unique. Draw Steel has had the pitch of tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy, and I like this line that appears in some of your like in your crowdfunding. The MCDM RPG makes building adventures and fighting monsters fun. What do you think about that idea of like how do you say what your game is? How do you differentiate?
Yeah, I think for us a big deal was we wanted to plant a flag, right? And I think many of the best games are not super broad, but they tend to be like a little bit more specific and deep. And I think, and this is corporate speak, but I come from like a television marketing background where we marketed television shows, right? And you would think, right, like you should beware the marketer or the person who says, well, this product is for everyone, right? And kids are going to love it, grandmas, punks and preps and, mods and rockers, right? Like everybody's going to like it. And you're like, uh-oh. This you really need a focused message, because would it be great if everybody liked it? Would it be great to create a revolution and you create the next sliced bread and everybody buys it?
Right.
Sure. But if you want a product to be successful, I think being honest with yourself is the first thing, because then you can be honest with people about what it is. So for us, right, we sat down and we said, well, what do we want? Well, we want a game that is tactical. That means positioning is going to matter on the battlefield and that sort of thing. And you're going to be able to really customize your character and make choices, and combat is going to matter, right? That's why we say fighting monsters is fun. And so we said all these things about this game we wanted to make. We made this list and said, okay, this means that if what you want is a investigative horror game, you're not going to use Draw Steel. And that is fine. We're fine with that because we already have Call of Cthulhu and all of these awesome Night's Black Agents, right? Like all these great products that we could do. And guess what? If we want to make an investigative horror game someday, we can. Like we can do that.
True. Well, and
we don't have to do it all.
MCDM has almost made itself known for saying, "Here's what we aren't," which I think is very clever. That we are not these things. It helps to kind of whittle down, maybe the people who would look at it and go, oh, yeah, no, I don't like this. Or they can just know, like, oh, yeah. And then the people who it speaks to, you can draw them in.
Yeah. And then I think what it is when you have that list of like, this is what this is, then it comes down to like, okay, we know why we like this stuff, right? We know why we want to make it. So let's lean into the coolest way to say it, right? Like, how do we say to you that like, hey, this is a game where you are going to have fun fighting monsters? Well, we should just say that, right? Like, because there's a lot of people who they play a game that then they don't have fun fighting monsters for one reason or another, whatever game that may be, right? And so for us, we were like, well, let's say like these are our goals. We want it to be fun to prep. We want it to be fun to fight monsters. And like, if we're narrowing the field, people will know that we're serious when we say that. Because if we said like it's fun to fight monsters, it's also fun to have romance. It's also fun to be ripped apart in a horror style and fun to investigate a murder, you'd be like, hang on. This is BS. I call BS on this, right? But if we're just saying we're doing this thing, right, and we're planting our flag, you're like, I believe that if you focused on that, you could do it. And so that's a big thing. And I did like that is something that in television marketing you learn a lot about. Like you study brands that are popular and what makes them last, right? And like Apple, a thing that revived Apple in the 90s was this whole Think Different campaign, right? Which was about saying like, you know what? Actually, we know there are people out there who like PCs. We're not a PC.
Right.
And we are proudly going to say that instead of trying to pretend we're a PC, because there's this whole audience of people who are displeased with PCs and now they know they can come to us, right? And that's sort of us. Like, hey, there's this whole audience of people who want to fight monsters, want to optimize characters, want to be heroes, right? Like that's a big thing for us is like, we know you want to feel heroic from level 1 and that kind of thing. And so let's market to those people and let them know they have a home with us, right? And that was the idea. Yeah.
One last thing on kind of, it kind of goes almost to the previous topic of reaching an audience, but it reminded me as I was considering Shadow Dark and how it's made kind of what it's about clear. Shadow Dark, Kelsey has talked about how she's not going into typical distribution, rather will create relationships with stores and sell to stores. And that's one of those things that, the old model, what caused Shadowrun to be on my shelf was that a company like FASA, who made Shadowrun back then, now it's Catalyst, but back when they made it, you would just enter the distribution network, which means you get, a quarter of the price tag of the book is what you get to keep. And then you have to pay all your costs out of that. So it's a very rough business. And what Kelsey has sort of said is, I'm just going to find a few good stores and sell to those. How, and you don't have to say what you're planning on doing or whatever, but have you guys talked about at MCDM, is distribution, is it important for you to be in every gaming store, given that your game is different? Do you want to be in some game stores on Amazon, right? Like,
it's hard, and especially because like, I think we look at some models of distribution and we have to ask ourselves, is it worth it, right? And I am not. We're a big company for an RPG company. We have 11 full-time employees, which is a lot. And so I am thankfully not in charge of operations, right? And we have a great team who is in charge of operations who looks into that. But right now, right? And Kingdoms of Warfare, right? All of the Flea Mortals, those books you held up, those are all sold through our online store, right? That is the place you buy them. You don't pick them up on Amazon, right? And there are a couple places I think that we've worked, like a game stores like in Europe that we have worked with in the past to try to make shipping easier on our European customer base and stuff like that. And we are honestly always trying to look at ways to like, we print in the United States and we have for years, right? And so we're sort of lucky that this whole tariff thing right now hasn't affected us very much. Now, anything can change at any moment. But we have seen the impact of tariffs in other places because we're shipping from the United States to other places, right? And it's like, well, they have a tariff on our goods, and how much does that cost people, right? So we're always trying to figure that part of it out, because right now everything is sold through us, and we have so we've looked at a bunch of distribution models for Charles Steele, right? And there's like a third-party distro, right? That's how a lot of people do it. They work with somebody else who goes and gets your book placed in stores and stuff like that.
Alliance or something like that.
Yeah. And we've looked at, I know that our general manager, right, looks at things like Shadow Dark a lot to see like, how are they doing it? Is this a better model for us, right? And so we're in all of those conversations right now, I think internally at least, and I don't know about externally, but for Charles Steele, that is something our general manager is always talking about, because we would love to be, right? I think there is a fair number, and we've seen this, right? Like the Target exclusive box sets from D&D that are in Target for a month is because somebody is going to Target and buying a lot of D&D box sets, which are starter sets which get kids playing the game, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, if it doesn't need to be through Target, right? And for me, that I had the same game store experience where it was like, you'd sit around with your friends, right? And be like, it'd be cool. It'd be so cool if there was like superheroes, Dungeons and Dragons, right? And then you go to the game store and you'd be like, oh my God, it exists. Look, there it is. There's 3 of them on the shelf. They're all different. Like, everybody grab one and page through them while we're here. And then we bought one at the end of the day, right? Yeah. So, I think that is huge. And I also think that like, I've seen you talk about this before. There's the online community, right? Which is great. It's great, but it is not representative of the whole greater. Think about all your friends who when you play D&D with, they like don't know who Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford are, right? Because they're like, no, I just show up at your house once a week. I bring my player's handbook and we play, right? And it's like, how do we reach those people, right? Is what I want to know.
Yeah, right? Because they're not on Blue Sky every day or wherever, and Right. Well, you've mentioned starter sets a number of times, and that is a fascinating. I love that subject. How has MCDM looked at that concept of what the MCDM, what a starter set is trying to do, what it could do for Draw Steel?
Yeah, so I am currently finishing up our first starter set. It's about to go into edit and everything. And it was really interesting because I looked at a bunch of different starter sets, and actually on my desk here, the Pathfinder 2 beginner box is really great. It's really great when you open it up, right? There's this thing that says, hey, is this your first time ever playing Pathfinder 2? Well, and you want to play now because you thought this was Monopoly and you could just open the box and play it, and didn't realize, well, guess what? You can. Here's what you should do. Hand out these character sheets to people, and now step by step, we're going to go through and do this, right? Nice. And so it really caters to totally new players, right? And then also has this like, hey, do you know how a role-playing game works? Great. Here's what you can do then instead, right? And so we're trying to harness a little bit of that same energy. In addition, like our character sheets, it's like, hey, start with just this part of the sheet. This is all you need for the first combat. Now we open it up, and monster stat blocks are getting a little longer each time, right? Oh, hey, guess what? Now we're adding triggered actions, and you didn't know about those. Well, now they're here, and now they're right. So like, you don't need to know every rule at first, right? So we're trying to work on that experience of like easing people into the game, so that if you're new, you are like, okay, I get it, and it's that kind of thing. And I think we also we're sort of attacking this on multiple fronts, right? We also know that there are people who already know what a role-playing game is, and they're going to want to be like, but how is Draw Steel different? How is it different from the game that I typically play, which is probably D&D? And so we have a second starter set that we're making. So we're making 2 starter sets, one that we're calling the beginner. I think we're calling it the Start Here box is the idea, right? So that if you come to our site, it's like, what do I do? Start here, right? And then we have the advanced starter set, which is the Fall of Black Bottom, right? Which is this like, you start in and somebody drops a bunch of demons on it, and it's like, go, 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 right? We assume you know what a role-playing game is, and we're just dropping you into the deep end. And then we're also putting out an adventure that people can run at conventions, right? Nice. Because we know that like, this is true for me, and I think it's true for you too. One of the best ways to try out a new game, if your group isn't readily available, go to a convention, sign up for like a 2 to 4 hour time slot, and by the end you'll have an opinion about that game, and you didn't need to read anything other than a character sheet. And so we're making that, and we want to make that available for anybody to run anywhere, right? You can run it at a con, you can run it at a game store or library, you could bring it to your home group and run it, right? Like, and so it's sort of this 3-pronged approach until we figure out how to get our books, on more shelves and things like that. That's the plan.
I love it. Yeah. That's super great. Yeah, it's funny. So I played Deadlands a long time ago. The first original edition. I had a fantastic DM, and so I was sort of had a little bit of a love affair for the game, just because that DM made such a great experience. And so recently, not too long ago, there was a Kickstarter for Deadlands, and so I went in to just be like, let's get the latest version of it and let's run something. And it came with this adventure, Horror at Headstone Hill, in a little box set. it is not a starter set, but it might feel like one in that it comes in a little thin box and has tokens and various things like that. But this thing includes a town in it that has 60 locations.
Oh my God.
And the heart of play is these 60 locations. And anything can happen at these. It's very open, kind of sandboxy, go around town, decide who you want to talk to, and the DM rolls off of it. And there are threads that draw various people together. It's a lot. I've been running for years, and this adventure is teaching me many new skills, including organization and what to put on my DM screen and things like that, because it's so much. Wow. It's not a great starter set. It is the opposite of starter set. It is advanced, ultra advanced, adventure in a box, essentially, unless you just happen to be a natural predilection at being great at running this kind of adventure. And it makes me think a lot, like how many people might have backed that Kickstarter. And there is in the game itself, there is a included adventure, so I don't want to overplay it, but the natural thing to do in this crowdfunding was to then also get a copy of this adventure. And if you ran this, it is a lot. It is not for everybody. And so it is, I think, really important with games to do what MCDM is doing and think through, how do I make that first experience great? Free League has done that with its various starter sets that are the quick version of the game with the adventure that's designed to be relatively easy to run, lots of props, so you get a lot of feel-good payoff and things like that. And one of them, I know you and I have talked about this just in our everyday lives together, Pregens. I'd love to hear what you think about Pregens.
About pre-generated characters. Yeah,
there's the role they play.
I think I can't stress this enough. They need to be cool, and they need to be good at onboarding, right? And so, like for Draw Steel, you can build at first level actually a fairly complex character if you want, right? Yeah. But you can also build a more simple and straightforward character. And when we first built the pre-gens for the Delian Tomb, I was like, you know what we should do is we have all these, as you go through the book, there are all these quick build suggestions for your characters. And we say in the book, like, if you're following the quick build, we're trying to make the simplest character possible for you, because we assume if you're following the quick build, that's what you want, right? Like that you don't want to look at every option. You want the thing that's going to be like, hey, what does the most damage to a single target, right? Like, boom, that's what you want.
Solid,
probably.
Feel good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly, right? Like this is going to be fun. It's going to be, and you'll be cool, right? Like we, and that comes through our game balance, right? We try to make it that like no one option is cooler than another, right? And so, and so when we built these pre-gens at first, we sent them to playtesters who've been playtesting the game for like a year and a half, and they were like, well, why would you pick this? What, don't you want this? This one, you get to like whip 3 people around and you move 10 spaces and it's like, well, right. But hang on, you need to approach this from the perspective of a new player, right? And it was like, and they were like, oh, got it. Okay, right. And that I think makes a big difference, having like something simple, right? So for instance, there's a reason why when you look at the pre-gens in the starter set, it's an evocation wizard, right? Is the beginner one, because like that's the wizard that shoots fire, and that's what most people are going to want to do.
It's not illusion. It's
yeah, exactly, right. You're not an illusionist. You're not a necromancer, right? Which I guess you can't be currently in the newest rules. But so those are so I think keeping it simple is great, but then also having having pre-gens that it's like you can see the story of who this person is, I think is helpful. Yeah. But you also want to leave enough room where it's like, but you can kind of customize this person if you want to, right? Yeah. I think goes a long way. So allowing somebody to pick like a name and gender is pretty simple, but lets them feel ownership then over that person in a way where if you were like, well, this is Biffles, and Biffles hails from the town of here, and they do this, and this is their personality, and this is you'd be like, whoa, I feel like now I'm just playing Biffles. I don't get to create kind of my own thing. So you want to kind of work that balance, and every game is different, right? Some games it might be important to give people personality traits, and some games it might not be as important.
The more you want it to be theirs versus a, say, convention experience, right? Convention experience can be really fun to be like, well, I will play the role like an actor would, right? I will play the role of Biffles and, dig into their weird fetish that they have. But when I'm making my own character, maybe I need it to last a little longer than that, and it's not going to be just simple comedy. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
and I
awesome.
also, one thing that, so our adventures are coming with those starter adventures come with 9 pre-gens. And the reason is we want to give you a lot of variety, right? So that if you're like, I really want to use magic, but there's only one magic user, and Teos also wants to really use magic. Well, we're already now setting up like a feels bad kind of thing, where it's like, oh, you get to be the wizard. I don't also get to be like a cool magic person. It's like, well, now guess what? If 5 people get together and 3 of them want to be cool magic people, we've got that option for you, right? Awesome. Or 3 of you want to be warriors, we've got that option for you.
That's awesome. That's great. I love it. How do you try to set up your starter sets as being a gateway or funnel that's going to lead to more?
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. One reason we call our starter box the Start Here box, there's an implication there that like, and then what, right? Like, okay, so you start here, but where should you go next, right? And what we do, right, is we want to make sure that, okay, in this experience, you're going to wrap up a story, right? And you're going to say like, okay, but your pre-gens leave room for more. Right, your pre-gens say like, okay, well, guess what? You started with Biffles, but now you get to make Biffles second level, right? And Biffles second level your Biffles second level might be different from somebody else's. But then also having some stuff where it's like at the end of that adventure, I think we are hopefully going to have second level adventures then available, and we'll say like, hey, if you want to know what to do next, you've got some options. You could go run one of these adventures, or you could create your own. And if you want to find out how to do more, here's where the cool rule books are. And the cool rule books are going to teach you how to level up your characters beyond whatever is in this box. They're going to teach you how to make your own adventures. They're going to give you more monsters to fight, right? And that kind of thing. And so letting people know that there is more out there, I think is really important. And setting it up so that like, okay, you have this option is good. But it also not making it an imperative, right? Like I don't think that a starter set should feel like, you know how often when there is season 1 of a television show and they don't know if they're going to get a season 2, they sort of wrap it up, but it's like, but we could come back for a season 2 and that would be fine. That's kind of how you want to wrap up your starter adventure, right? Because it's like, well, the thing that might actually get this group going is not continuing with this character, is knowing that now I can create my own Biffles, and right, I can get in there and make Miffles is going to be huge for continuing things.
Yeah, and playing with the concepts in this adventure sounds fun. Yeah, there's more I want to see about this world or the setting or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, exactly. And definitely giving some hints of the outside world, right? I think is huge, right? And so that's one thing we do is like we say like, hey, this starter adventure takes place in and around this village, right? But there's things coming from outside the village, and they're coming from here and there and everywhere, right? And it's just sort of feels natural, but it's like, oh, hey, I might want to go learn more about that king, right? Or this village over here where we're getting this kind of thing from, right? Like that could be part of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and you've got a great world, and the MCDM world is fantastic to play with. So as I've had the fortune to play with.
Yes, absolutely.
So before we leave, James, thank you for spending all this time with us. You have had great success crowdfunding. The core rules are going to come out. You're working on starter sets. Is there anything else on the horizon? I mean, that would keep me busy, and I'd be like, no, there's nothing else coming. But maybe there's more.
Yeah, so I don't. Matt has actually talked about this, so I feel comfortable talking about it. At the end of the year, we're going to have a crowdfunder, probably. Like I don't know the exact timing, but we're shooting for end of the year this year, 2025, and we are looking at putting a couple things in there. So this will be a chance for people who missed out on the core rules. If they want to get them there, they'll be able to buy them on our shop too once the core rules come out. But we're also creating an encounters book is one of the big things that we are putting together. And so that is going to be a book of encounters that you can drop in, not just combat, some puzzle related, some negotiation related, some montage test related, right? Like things that you can put in, advice for your game about how to run those. There's going to be adventures in there. So if you want to be able to continue your adventures, you're going to be part of that. And there's going to be setting and lore information is going to be part of that, right? For Draw Steel. So one thing that we've noticed is that like people are more likely to play your game if they see that it is currently being supported, right? Yeah. So that's a big thing that we're getting ready for. We're getting ready to do more stuff on our Patreon where we're going to put out content. So we constantly patrons get like play tests of stuff. They get copies of things, but they're also going to get like exclusive encounters that once the books come out, we're planning on dropping and that sort of thing. And then
I'm a supporter, so I like that. That sounds great. Thank you, James.
Oh, well, thank you for supporting us. Thank you very much. And remember, if you like Patreon, that you can support Mastering Dungeons on Patreon as well.
Get out of here. No.
And then we are, we're constantly looking at other than things that we're crowdfunding. What else can we do? Right. So we started some shorter adventures, right? We have some longer adventures we want to crowdfund, but it was like, hey, you know what? By the end of the year, we'd like to have this. And we're releasing 2 more classes right now. The Beast Heart, which we had a 5e version of. It's animal companion class, and the Summoner, which is what if you want to have a bunch of little things that you move around the field, pixies, undead, demons, stuff like that. And then, so those are all the Draw Steely things that we are working on. And then we have a bunch of other things, a bunch of other games that we would like to make that we're constantly talking about, but that's in the far future. And I don't know when those will come out.
That's great though.
I've been working on a game in my free time because
I love that. I just love hearing that, at MCDM headquarters, there are these 11 folks sitting around like doing the things and then also thinking about, I got this idea for a different game.
Yeah.
And that's all just going around in your brains back there. And cool. Well, I definitely look forward. I've heard a little bit on a recent interview you did talking about one of them. And yeah, I'm very curious to see where you'll go with that. So fantastic. Excellent. James, thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate it. We have talked about creating an awesome intro into RPGs. So what are we going to do right now?
We're going to go kill some role-playing game books. Boom.
Okay, so eliminate the competition. That sounds like a good tactic.
That's right. Yeah.
That sounds good. Well, then I will go on a crusade against traditional distribution, and that'll be my new RPG.
Yes.